Hello, and welcome to this forum for candidates seeking seats in the Minnesota House of Representatives for Districts 37B, 36A, 37A, and 36B. These races will be decided in the general election on November 6th. Early voting for this election will begin on September 21st, so just around the corner. I'm Gretchen Sable of the Anoka-Blaine Coon Rapids Area League of Women Voters, and we're the sponsor of this forum. While I do live in the area, I live in Andover, and I can't vote for any of the candidates. All the candidates in this race were invited to the forum, although not all have opted to attend. In the case where a single candidate is here for a race, that candidate will appear solo and answer questions. Here's some things you should know about the League of Women Voters. The League does not support or oppose any political parties or candidates for office. The League does help citizens become informed voters and advocates for the important issues that we've studied. That's what this evening's about, informing the voters. If you're interested in League, visit our website at www.lwvabcmn.org. And we have these handy-dandy little cards that has the website on, so you can get that as well. Anyone, women or men, over the age of 16 is welcome to join the League of Women Voters, and you'll find information on our website about our other activities as well as how to join. So tonight, our candidates are ready to go. What we're going to do is have each race up here separately, so we'll take a little break between races, and that way we'll get time to change the candidates. For each race, we're going to alternate who answers each question first, although in this case, won't be much alternation. Answers are limited to 1 minute each, and so you'll see timers wave. We have timers sitting in the front row letting candidates know when time's up. Each segment of the forum will start off with 3 questions that we provided to the candidates in advance. We'll then take questions from the audience, who will be provided to me during the forum by the question volunteers. Will the question volunteers please wave? Yeah. Audience members can get their questions to the question volunteers by raising their index card and having an usher convey it. Will the ushers please wave? There we go. So we got lots of volunteers here. We'll use questions that have been submitted online as well through our website. Each segment will end up with prepared 1-minute statement from each candidate. So, our first contest tonight is for House District 37B, which covers most of Blaine and part of Coon Rapids. The candidates for this race are Amir Malik, whom you see now, and Nolan West, who is invited but not present. We'll start off here with the 3 questions that were provided to the candidates in advance. So, I'll ask you the question, and then you can have your 1 minute. Okay. Amir, would you please describe your background and community involvement?
First of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. I want to thank everyone in the audience and those who are watching at home for taking the time to engage in the process. I also need to thank my wife and 4 children for being so supportive during this time, trying to make Blaine have better representation. I'm truly honored to be in front of you. Who would have thought that the son of immigrants, born and raised in a small town in rural Illinois, would be here before you contesting a race for the Minnesota State House. When I was told I would have this chance to face my opponent in front of the people of Blaine, to debate the issues that mattered, I jumped at it out of respect for the people of Blaine. You are the ones who will make the decision in November, and I would never insult you by avoiding this forum. As to my qualifications, while I do have a law degree, my education is not what qualifies me. What qualifies me is my commitment to a transparent government, to an honest government, to a government that encourages every member of our community to succeed.
He kind of lodged into the next question here. The next question is, what are your qualifications for serving as House of Representative, and why are you seeking this office?
Well, what qualifies me is my commitment to the values of the people of Blaine, to an honest government, a government that looks to educate our youth, protect our seniors, encourage hard work, and helping our neighbors when they're in need. I'm seeking office because Blaine deserves better. Blaine deserves better representation that respects our values and does the hard work necessary to do what's best for Blaine and not what's best for special interest groups or political parties.
Thank you. The third question is, what issue are you most passionate about, and what are your plans to address this matter?
I'm passionate about many issues, but if I had to boil it down, what I'm most passionate about is eliminating the obstacles and challenges preventing Blaine from reaching its full potential. You know there are people who are regularly delayed and stressed from the traffic on Highway 65. There are people in Blaine who are in their 50s and 60s who cannot get a job, not because they aren't qualified, not because they aren't willing to work hard, but because employers don't want to provide health care for them. We know how to fix these problems, but due to weak leadership at the Capitol, nothing has happened. All Minnesotans should be able to buy into Minnesota Care, and the premium should make sense. People shouldn't have to choose between working harder or losing their health care. Our tax dollars need to fund road construction in the North Metro instead of going to fund projects only in the South Metro. We need an overpass at 109th and Highway 65. For years, we've needed an overpass at Highway 65 and 109. But because of weak leadership and poor representation at the Capitol, we don't have it. I will work every day to eliminate the obstacles because Blaine deserves better.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to our audience questions. And as I said before, we also have some questions that came in online through our online question collector. So we're going to start with this one. Would you seek to increase spending and aid for mental health programs?
Mental health is really important to the people of Blaine. All people. I visited 2 of the county jails in Minnesota. Both of the heads of the jails told me that the #1 thing the legislature could help them to do their job was to increase mental health services. We are having a crisis. There needs to be more funding, and we will get a good return on that investment because if you handle things early instead of in an emergency room or in a prison, it's better for all the people of Blaine so they can reach their potential.
Thank you. The next question, I've seen what happens with school cutbacks. What will you do to provide for the educational needs of our children?
Well, I was a teacher for 10 years. My wife still teaches now. Education is near and dear to me, and I was happy to be endorsed by Education Minnesota. I think education is important. It goes with my overall theme of helping people to reach their potential. For many of us, this is our way up. When my father came as an immigrant here, education is what helped him. He was able to work in a laboratory, get his PhD. I was able to go through, get an education. My brother was able to join the Navy and have them pay for his medical school. These are the things that we need, and cutting education only hurts Minnesota's workforce competitiveness and the morale of people. People want to work hard, they want to improve themselves, and we need to make sure they have the education needed to do that.
Thank you. The next one is also education related. Do you support school vouchers? Why or why not?
I don't support, are we talking school vouchers for private education?
The question just says support school vouchers, so I assume it is too.
Yes, I don't support school vouchers for private education. I do believe in choice. If people want to put their children in private schools, my children have done a variety of things. I've done homeschooling. My children have been in public institutions. They've been in private institutions. So I'm a big believer in choice, but I also believe that a foundation for a successful society is a very strong public school system. And that's why I'm happy to have people, if they want to put their children in private school, that's wonderful. But we cannot cut funding from public education because that's the engine for moving up the economic ladder.
Thank you. We're going to switch to an environment question. Do you believe that climate change is real? And if so, how do you think we can best combat it?
Okay, I'll try to say this with a straight face. Yes, I think climate change is real. And how can we combat it? That's where science comes in. We have to reduce our CO2 levels. I'm not going to say I'm an expert on it. While I am happy to have been endorsed by the Sierra Club for my conservation values, it is a big process, and what we're going backwards right now in how we deal with climate change. and that we're polluting the air more, and it's going to be hard to reverse it. But the biggest thing is we need to enforce our regulations. We should not weaken them in any way, and we have to reduce the amount of CO2 that's going into the atmosphere.
Here's an interesting one. Explain why you would or would not support restoring the right to vote to citizens living in the community on probation or parole due to a felony conviction.
Okay. I'm a big believer in law and order. I mean, I am a constitutional rights attorney, but I'm also a big believer in when a punishment is done, it's done. And we should give people a second chance, and there should be forgiveness. Society should choose what punishment it thinks is appropriate for somebody, but when they're done, they should be allowed to fully integrate back into society. They should be able to vote. They should be able to make a living. The number one way to know if there will be recidivism, if someone will go back to jail, is if they're able to get employment. People who get jobs commit fewer crimes. There's less desperation. They feel better about themselves. They have dignity. So I do think that when people come out of prison, they should be allowed to fully integrate into society and vote and work.
Thank you. On a different topic, do you support a woman's right to make their own medical decisions as it relates to reproductive health?
Abortion is a personal and private decision that should be made between a woman and her healthcare provider. Like all Minnesotans, I would like to see fewer abortions. But for that to happen, we have to have a culture that promotes birth. We need to take away the fear that people have about not having health care, not having education available. That's the path we would need to go on if we want to see fewer abortions.
Thank you. A question on a very different topic. Why should we have a Metropolitan Council? What are the benefits and what are the negatives?
The Metropolitan Council was first introduced 50 years ago or more to integrate the sewer systems. As we've seen, it's when everybody is focused on their own interests, it is hard sometimes to work together. So the Metropolitan Council, its goal is to help integrate the different counties, to have the sewers connected, to have the roads connected. And I do think that this is important, to have people who are looking at the big picture. Because we have projects that go through multiple cities, and it's not always easy to get agreement. Look at Highway 65. We have had this problem for years, and it has not been dealt with. And I think it's important, while there are changes I would make to the Metropolitan Council, I do believe in staggered terms, so we're not clearing everybody out at one time. It should be every 2 years that you're rotating people in and out, but I think it does serve a valuable purpose, and there does need to be reform, though.
Thank you. We've got a couple questions on the kind of your policy, your philosophy of government. With the Citizens United case dramatically changing how campaigns are funded, what do you think should be done?
Campaign finance has really become a hot topic since Citizens United. When I decided to run, I was one of the few candidates who decided I would not accept any lobbyist money, any PAC money, any corporate money, no special interest money. And it's because this is what I heard from the people of Blaine. They were tired of people who they thought were bought off. They wanted something better. And they responded to that. They responded by donating tremendously. Almost all of my money has come from the people of Minnesota, most of it from Blaine. I have raised more than double the money of my opponent, even though he accepts special interest money. So that shows that this is what the people of Blaine want. And I think that we need to move away from being controlled by special interest, because it's human nature. If someone gives you $50,000, of course you're going to feel positive towards them.
Thank you. How would you reform the House rules to make the legislative process more open and transparent to the public?
Unfortunately, this year was a disaster in the House. Everything became secretive. Bills that made no sense came through. We need to follow the Constitution. That would be a good way to start. The Constitution states that there should be one topic per bill. That's not what happened this year. Just to score political points, the Republicans put everything into a 990-page bill. And 4 hours after it was printed, they said, we're going to vote on it. I couldn't read a children's book to my children at night that's 990 pages in 4 hours. Yet this is a bill that they had. They knew it would be vetoed. They didn't care. It was okay that basic things like protecting the elderly or dealing with opioid abuse, it was okay if it scored some political points. So I think a big part is we need to have open hearings. Everything should have hearings. They should be open to amendments, and we need to follow the Constitution.
Thanks. We're running out of time, so what I'm going to do is 2 more questions and then your final statement. The next to the last question, do you support a state-sponsored sick time and paid parental leave for all Minnesotans?
Yes, I do. Again, this goes back to helping people reach their potential. You should not be penalized for having a child. Children are wonderful. I have 4 of them. I love all of them. And we should not be penalizing people for having children. And this goes back to before about having a society that promotes birth and respects mothers and respects fathers and respects family. And leaving people to think that, oh, if I have a child, I'm going to get demoted. I won't get that promotion. This is wrong. I don't believe in it. And I believe that showing people that you care about them and their families makes them more productive employees.
Thank you. Do you believe gender identity should be a protected class in cases of discrimination in Minnesota?
Yes.
You got that, timers?
I'm trying to balance out for the other questions.
Yeah. So, would you like to give your closing statement now?
Sure. Thank you for having me here and for attending. The ability to choose our leaders and our laws is a wonderful thing. As a constitutional rights attorney, I devote myself every day to supporting and upholding the Constitution of the United States, and I'm happy to see so many people here engaged. When I decided last year to be a different kind of candidate, to refuse all lobbyist, corporate, and PAC money, I did it because I believed the people of Blaine wanted something different, and they have responded. They responded by having a record turnout at our caucus in February. They responded by having thousands of one-on-one conversations since then about the hopes and dreams of the people of Blaine, how we can get better representation. They responded by donating very generously. I hope you'll respond too and cast your vote for our campaign on November 6th to give Blaine the representation it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The second contest tonight is for Minnesota House District 36A, which covers parts of Coon Rapids and Champlain across the river. The candidates for this race are Bill Marish on the left and Zach Stevenson. We'll start off here with 3 questions that were provided to the candidates in advance. What we're going to do too is go back and forth between the 2 of you. So we're going to start with Bill. So, Bill, would you describe your background and community involvement?
I never saw that question as a pre-question sent to me, so it's
Oh, okay.
surprising me, but that's okay. What I had as qualifications is, I'm qualified as a citizen. I'm qualified as a citizen, and I believe the government was designed to have representatives from the community so that they can be voted in and represent their neighbors. I'm qualified, I believe, because of my commitment to succeed. I married my girlfriend from high school, been married for 36 years. We have 4 children, 4th grandchild on the way. I've represented my country in 3 world championships. I've served in the military. Combine that with my 29 years of teaching. What I've learned is to goal set and accomplish the goals that I set. How do you accomplish them? You set priorities. I will set priorities in St. Paul. I'll make sure that we're spending your money properly, cutting wasteful spending, be able to lower taxes and reduce our healthcare costs.
Thank you. Zach, can you describe your background and community involvement for us?
Yes, thank you first of all for moderating tonight. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting. Thanks to this packed room. It's so exciting to see so many people here and to everyone watching. So I'm Zach Stevenson. I'm a lifelong resident of the northern suburbs. Grew up right here in Coon Rapids. In fact, I didn't get very far in life. I live a mile down the road from the house I grew up in. I'm the father of 2 beautiful little girls who are 3 and 6 as of last Sunday. I keep wanting to say 5. And I'm a prosecutor for Hennepin County. Very involved in my community. I am on the Coon Rapids Planning Commission. I'm also very involved at my church, the United Church of Christ in Anoka.
Thank you. The second question, we'll start with Zach. What is your qualifications for serving as a Minnesota representative, and why are you seeking this office?
Well, you know, I'm seeking this office because I'm really worried about the world that those 2 little daughters of mine are growing up in. I think that's something that a lot of parents think a lot about. I maybe think about it a little bit differently as a prosecutor. I worry about the fact that there's just no accountability in our politics any longer. You know, we have politicians who say they're going to do one thing, they do the exact opposite. They pass massive bills in the middle of the night that no one's read. There's no accountability in that. And there's no common sense in our government these days either. And so that's why I'm running, to bring more accountability and common sense. And as for qualifications, as I said, I've lived in this community my whole life. I understand it very deeply. And I have a vested stake in it now that I've got 2 little girls that are growing up right here. I'm also a prosecutor for Hennepin County, so I understand public safety and know what we can do to keep our community safe. And last, I was a staffer to Senator Amy Klobuchar, and boy, did I learn a lot working for Amy. I learned how important it is to work hard. I learned how important it is to listen to all sides, work together, find common sense solutions that work for everyone.
Thank you.
What I'm most passionate about is to serve. I want to serve the people of Champlin and Coon Rapids. I grew up in Blaine, Coon Rapids, old stomping grounds. Been at Champlin Park for 25 years, and I want to serve the people. When I'm out knocking on doors, the number one thing I hear is how healthcare costs have risen. This is a problem that can be solved. We have to have price disclosure. If we have that, listen, nobody knows what it costs to have your knee operated on. We don't even know what it costs to get an appendix taken out. But if we knew that, you'd be able to shop. If you can shop, you have competition between hospitals, you have competition between insurance companies. That's the key. This would lower the rates, and what we cannot do is even think about going backwards. We've seen a failed program. Single payer government insurance, it doesn't work. Even the liberal think tanks say that it will cost $17 billion to sustain that kind of a program.
Thank you. The final question is, what issue are you most passionate about, and what are your plans to address this issue, this matter? And we're going to start with Phil.
Well, I just answered that question.
Yeah.
Because I have different questions that were on here, but I'll respond to this. I'm a teacher, and when I knock on the doors and I tell them I'm a teacher, they look at me, and then I tell them I'm a Republican, and then they faint. They don't believe it. They go, there's no such thing as a teacher and a Republican. And I go, well, there's a few of us. But as a teacher, what I've learned is I've learned to listen. And I try to create an environment that's non-judgmental, that we accept all ideas, that we talk, and we try to get to the best course of action. all ideas should be valued, and I think that's how you collaborate and work with across the aisle. Again, what I hear the most is, especially right now, is the daycare fraud, the wasteful spending that's happening, the welfare fraud that's happening, and that's what we have to do, and we'll have to talk to each other, listen to each other, and we can accomplish these things.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson?
So the issue that I am most passionate about is education. I believe that the reason why we enjoy such a great quality of life in Minnesota is our shared commitment to having superior education. That's what's made us great for the last few decades. Unfortunately, I think we're falling a little bit behind in Minnesota, and I think we really need a world-class school system in Minnesota to preserve this great quality of life that we have. And I think that means we need to be doing lots of things at all different stages of education, all the way from early education all the way through higher education. We need to make sure that every kid gets a really quality early education. Study after study tells us that that's the silver bullet to making sure that we have strong achieving kids all the way through. We need rigorous K-12 schools. You know, the number one thing that foreign exchange students say when they come to the United States is they're surprised by the lack of rigor in our schools. We got to change that. And a big way that we can help our K-12 schools is getting class sizes down. Class sizes in our high schools can be as big as 35 or 36. That's way too big. We need to get them down.
Thanks, and I'm sorry for the confusion with the questions.
That's okay.
We'll move into others that you haven't heard before. So the first one, our excessively high health costs have a negative effect on business and wages. Given the situation, what do you think the Minnesota legislature should do about health care problems? And we're going to start with Mr. Stevenson.
Well, you know, I'll tell you one thing. I think Bill had a good idea a minute ago talking about transparency and pricing. I think that's absolutely a good idea. I don't think it goes nearly far enough. There's a lot of times when you have a medical condition, it's just not practical to shop around. I mean, if you have an emergency heart attack, you're not going to drive from hospital to hospital to see where you can find the best deal. So we need to make sure people have reliable and affordable health care all the time. One idea I think is really great is Minnesota Care expansion. Let anyone buy into Minnesota Care if they want to have the option to do it. The people who have Minnesota Care now like the program. It works well. And we should all have the opportunity to buy into Minnesota Care if we want to do that. We also need to do a lot to get prescription drug prices down. That is really something that I hear a lot from our senior citizens. Frankly, it's outrageous the way that prescription drug companies have been jacking up prices. We all remember a couple years ago when the EpiPen producer raised prices 1,000%. That isn't because the cost of manufacturing the EpiPen went up 1,000%. It's because they knew that people who needed it would pay it. That's wrong.
Yeah, we have to be able to identify the bad actors out there. We have to. You know, I don't even know how all that works, what's happening, why the costs are so high. The EpiPen, that's just ridiculous. You know, that should never happen. I'm a believer in competition, you know, and I know there'll be emergency procedures, but when we can look at what the costs are and we can guarantee a good quality health care system at a lower rate, it's not going to be the government that's going to do it for us. They just can't do it. Listen, $17 billion means $3,000 out of every pocket of every man, woman, and child in Minnesota. We can't afford that. We can't go that direction. What we need is price disclosure. We need competition. That's what will drive the prices and keep the quality high.
Thank you. Our next question relates to mental health, and we're going to start with Bill. People with mental illnesses and substance abuse disorder need safe, affordable, and stable housing in order to recover. Unfortunately, they're much more likely to experience housing instability or even homelessness. What are you going to do to address this housing gap in our mental health system?
I think this is something where, you know, if you prioritize and you're stopping all the wasteful spending, that this is a priority that would be up there. And I would combine it probably with our community, meaning faith-based organizations. Am I my brother's keeper? You can answer that however you want. But am I my brother's brother? I am. I'm here to serve my fellow man. Our churches and communities need to be combined with some government programs that help these people and afford them the housing that they need and the programs they need to protect them and the people around them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Ms. Zach?
Well, these are two issues that are near and dear to my heart because they're things that I see very close on a day-to-day basis as a prosecutor. The amount of crime in our community that's caused either by untreated mental illness or chemical dependence, and frankly those things go together all too often, is just stunning. We have a mental health care crisis in our state that no one is talking about, and it's very closely related to the increasing uses of opioids and methamphetamine in our community. Getting housing is a great way to get started. We know people who have stable housing are less likely to commit crime, more likely to be productive members of society. It's easier for people to get jobs, and so government absolutely has a role in doing that and in making sure that we have a good supply of housing that people can afford to purchase on their own. We're starting to have a housing crisis just for the general population in our community. We need to be working on that as well.
Thank you. The next question is an environment question, and we're going to start with Zach. What is your position on green energy, clean water, and clean air, and how should the state of Minnesota move forward on these topics?
I favor all three of those things. Look, we need to be a leader. We need to be a leader on green energy, on clean air, and clean water. First of all, water is our #1 asset as a state. We're the land of 10,000 lakes, after all. We need to make sure we're protecting our water, increasing standards to make sure that everyone not just has clean water to drink, but clean water to play in. This is a local issue. The Mississippi River, as it comes through Coon Rapids, is now an impaired waterway because of agricultural pollution in the Crow River. We need to clean up the Crow so that our kids, my kids, your kids, and their grandkids can all play in the Mississippi River. Minnesota's been a leader on green energy too, and that's a great thing to be proud of, but we can go further. We can make sure that we have great solar programs throughout the state of Minnesota, that wind energy is more prevalent. That will be not just a way to improve the environment, but it'll give us energy independence and get the costs down.
Thank you. Bill? I can read the question again if you like.
No, that's okay. Often they seem to be at odds to be able to provide jobs and protect our environment, and it just doesn't need to be that way. We have science and technology today that we can do both. They don't have to be at odds. It doesn't have to be a partisan issue. We have the Mississippi running right between our cities, and no one wants pollution. So if we can't follow a 57-year-old model out of Montana. We have to follow the models that are out there today. The science and technology that are out there today can, with our abundant resources, can provide jobs for our people to support their families and protect our environment. We can do both.
Thanks. We're going to do a teaching-related question now, and we're going to start with Bill. Do you support teaching scientifically supported theories like the theory of evolution and climate change?
The theory of evolution is the accepted science. It is what is out there to explain the diversity in life. It has to be. If you're teaching science, you're going to teach evolution.
Thanks. Zach?
Yes to both evolution and climate change. They both need to be taught in our schools. Science is so critically important to having world-class schools in Minnesota, and these are both, as Bill just said, as to evolution, and I would certainly say as to climate change, science issues. And so we need to be teaching both in our schools. We need to make sure that every kid in Minnesota gets a rigorous and comprehensive science education.
Thank you. We now have 2 questions about firearms, and we're going to start with Zach. Do you believe that domestic abusers should have access to firearms?
I do not. I'm a prosecutor. I deal with public safety issues every day. And we need to make sure that people who have a record of violence, who are violent criminals, don't have access to firearms.
Thank you. Bill?
I support the law. It's against the law, I believe. In fact, I believe judges or law enforcement officers are supposed to take the guns away from them. I don't think it happens oftentimes, but the law is that they should not have a gun if they've lost the right and privilege to do so.
Thank you. In a related question, starting with Bill, do you believe teachers should be armed?
I'm a teacher. I know a lot of teachers that I would run the other direction if I saw them with a gun.
So we'll take that as a no?
Well, listen, why would you put a gun on a hip of somebody that is uncomfortable with the gun, that doesn't want the gun and can't use the gun? It would cause far more problems. We need to focus more on what I see in the schools. I see kids struggling, and we need programs to deal with the mental health, programs that can bridge the gap to find them their place. They're lost. And if we want to prioritize and put money in the right place, that's where we put it, to protect those kids that need protection and to protect the kids around them. Not a gun on it. No teacher goes to college to go, I'm going to carry a gun on my hip.
Mr. Stevenson.
Well, I'm very pleased to agree with Bill on this. Guns don't belong in schools. They just don't. We can keep kids safe without arming teachers. We don't need to do that. It's a bad idea. It would make our children less safe. We shouldn't do it.
Thanks. So Zach, do you support state-sponsored sick time and paid parental leave for all Minnesotans?
I absolutely do. I have 2 little girls. They're 3 and 6. And when I was a new dad, I was really lucky to be able to spend time with them, to take time off work and enjoy those first few weeks of being around them and getting to know them. And I wouldn't trade that experience for the world. Everyone should have that opportunity. But you know what else no one's talking about when we talk about paid leave is people will use it also to take care of a sick relative or parents at the end of life. And with an aging population in Minnesota, our population is going to go from 800,000 senior citizens today to 1.2 million senior citizens very soon. That's a really big need that Minnesotans are going to have to be able to spend time with their parents and take care of them as they grow older. And so we absolutely need to have paid leave, paid family leave for all Minnesotans.
Thank you, Bill.
You know, being a teacher and not familiar with all the taxes and the laws and state-sponsored this and that, I do know this. Capitalism, the free market system, they're competing for good employees. The people that I'm familiar with, the people that I've talked with, they are offered sick leave. They're offered maternity leave, paternity leave. They're offered these things because if you want good employees, you better offer these things or they're not going to work for you. So I'm not sure if we need the state getting involved and having a program where they fund that. If that's the question, I think the businesses should be offering those things.
Thanks. So Bill, do you support school vouchers? Why or why not?
I always support choice. I'm a parent. My kids are old now, but if it's my tax dollars and I want my child to go to a school that's best for them, we have it happen at Champlain Park all the time. They fill out the reasons, they present them to the Minnesota State High School League, there's reasons for them to leave. When my kids go to college, I help them decide which college to pick. Why wouldn't I want them to be able to choose when they're going to high school? If I'm a STEM guy, I'm a science and technology guy, I'm going to go to a science and technology school. And I'm going to take that voucher and I'm going to use it there. It's my money, it's my tax money. Why can't I use it where I want? If I'm into band, I'm going to Champlain Park because we got a great band. If I'm a football player, maybe I go to Eden Prairie because they got the football program. But I certainly should have the choice to choose what school my children go to.
Even if it's a private school?
Even if it's a private school, use it and apply towards those fees.
Thank you. Zach?
Well, I think Bill set up a false choice there between having choice in schools and whether you're going to take money out of the public schools and use them to fund private schools. Certainly, I believe that anyone should be able to choose to send their children to whatever school they want to. And increasingly, by the way, I run into a lot of people who are homeschooling their kids, and that's a great choice to make as well. That works for a lot of families. But the question relates to vouchers. And vouchers are about taking money away from public schools and using them to fund private school education. And I just think we can't afford that. Bill said earlier he supports prioritizing how we spend our money, our tax dollars. And I agree with that. We really need to prioritize how we spend our money. And number one priority in Minnesota should be education, having a world-class public education system. We can't be taking money away from that.
Thank you. We're going to move back to the environment a little bit, and we're going to start with Zach. Since we have not taken sufficient actions yet to prevent at least moderate global warming, what would you propose to help our communities do to adapt to coming climate change?
Oh boy. Well, I think the first thing is we can't give up hope and action to slow down climate change. So we need to be working really hard to promote green energy, wind and solar. We need to be working to promote electric cars and other things that will decrease carbon emissions. Another big thing that we're going to need to do, water is going to be increasingly important in a world where we see more global warming and more climate change. And so we need to be protecting our water here in Minnesota to make sure that everyone has good access to water. We need to be working proactively to protect our great northern woods. How many people in the audience today love to go up north and play in the woods? The woods are disappearing right now because of climate change, and we need to protect them as we see climate change continuing to unfold. So I think the answer is we need to be proactive in continuing to fight climate change while also taking an extra step to accommodate the changes that are happening now.
Thank you, Bill.
You know, I believe our science and technology is excellent. I read, I look, I'm not a scientist. Climate is always changing. When I was in school, we were going to be under ice. We'd already be under ice. That's what the projection was, that we were going to an ice age. Now they're talking about warming. It's changing. Climate does change. Do we want to pollute? No, nobody wants to pollute. Is global warming happening? Are the waters a little bit warmer? Yeah. Oh, what does that mean? Are they going to cool back down? Are they going to continue to go up? I mean, you just follow the science and you follow the directions that they give. I'm not really sure about global warming.
Okay, thanks. Quick change in a very different direction. Do you support same-sex marriage? It's already been decided in Minnesota, but how do you feel about that?
Am I up?
You are, yes.
Yeah, it's been decided.
Well, I also support same-sex marriage, and not just because it's decided, because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. So back to Zach then. Explain why you would or would not support restoring the right to vote to citizens living in the community who are on probation or parole due to a felony conviction. So I want to explain that a little bit more. They've already completed their jail time. Now they're living in the community on probation or parole.
Yep, that's right. And, you know, I'm a prosecutor, as I mentioned before. And so on a regular daily basis, I have the difficult task of standing before a judge and asking that judge to send someone to prison. And I take it very seriously because it's changing someone's life forever. The truth is, though, once someone has paid their debt to society, once they have gotten out of prison, we need to restore them to the community as quickly as possible. That's what probation and parole, which we in Minnesota actually call supervised release, is all about. It's about integrating people back into the community. And so those people should be able to vote. We should be trying to make them productive members of society and treating them exactly the same as we treat everybody else.
Thank you, Bill.
I believe in forgiveness. I have a mentor, and he has taught me to always forgive. People can lose their rights, they can lose their privileges by their choices. I'm not a prosecutor, but I'm sure it would be very difficult to have to do that and send people to prison. And while they're there, they've lost privileges and rights. But we have to forgive them. If they come out, they've served their time, they've done their penance, why would they not be able to vote again?
Thank you. So we're going to look at a little bit of legislative philosophy. What is your opinion on large omnibus bills? And Bill gets to go first.
Omnibus bills confuse me. I've been going to the House to watch things, and it's like, why do they wait till the end to do things? Why don't they get things done in a more orderly fashion? Why there's omnibus bills, I don't like them. But I'll tell you this, if the bill presents a proposal to reduce health care, I'm voting for it. I'm not going to not vote for it because it's in an omnibus bill. If it's going to cut taxes, if it's in an omnibus bill, I'm not going to go, well, I can't vote for it because it's an omnibus bill. I'm going to vote for it. If it's going to stop wasteful spending, even if it's an omnibus bill, I'm voting for it. You know, it is gamemanship. It's a way to play politics, and I don't like it. But I'm certainly going to represent my people and vote for it if it helps my people in Champlin and Coon Rapids.
Thanks for that. Zach?
Well, you know, the number of omnibus bills in the legislature has increased dramatically over the last year. So what does that mean? That means that politicians in St. Paul are voting on less and less bills, even though they contain the same number of rules and laws for us to follow. And the reason why they're doing that, the reason why they're rolling all those bills up into one, is because they're playing games with one another. They're trying to jam popular things and unpopular things together in order to force the other side to accept something that they don't like. Too often today, our politics are about making sure the other side doesn't win or trying to make sure I get 100% of my way. And when I'm out talking to people in Champlin and Coon Rapids, this is the number one thing that people tell me they're frustrated with. They're tired of the bickering and the game playing and the partisan nonsense. And this is grade A example 1 of what's going on in St. Paul that people are sick of. And I'd stand up to it if I'm elected.
Thanks a lot. So now it's closing time, and we'll ask each of you to give your closing statements, and we'll start with Zach.
Well, I want to thank you again for moderating and thank everyone again for these phenomenal questions that we had tonight. It's always such a pleasure to be able to talk to people about the future of Minnesota and where we're headed. You know, we have a great thing going in Minnesota. We have a great quality of life, good schools, strong economy. I want to make sure it stays that way, so that my children and my children's children can enjoy the same great state that I've enjoyed. And as I said to you tonight, for me that means making sure that we have a world-class school system, a strong healthcare system, a vibrant economy. We can do those things. We've been doing them for years. It just means we need to set aside the game playing, the Washington-style slash and burn politics, the name-calling, the tweeting. All of that needs to go away so we can start working together. We have a long history of doing that in Minnesota, and we can do it again. I'm committed to doing that if I'm elected. So thank you so much, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you, Bill.
You know, I want to thank you, the moderator, for organizing this. Thank my opponent for being here, and thank you guys for coming. You know, I really think our politicians need to get together and get on the same page also, and set the priorities the way they should be. I believe that the choice is pretty simple. If we look at the two of us and you look at our backgrounds and where we've been and what we do from writing and blogging and what we've done, you'll see a definite difference in who to vote for. As a legislator, I am going to fight to get healthcare down, healthcare costs down. That's what I hear the most at the door. I hear often recently the wasteful spending with daycare centers and millions of dollars being sent. I hear things about doing, you know, income checks to make sure that we're not, that billionaires aren't getting, yacht-owning billionaires are getting welfare checks. That's ridiculous. I will fight to stop those things. I will fight to make sure that Anoka Hennepin gets their fair share of educational funding. My name is Coach Bill Marish. I hope I can get your vote on November 6th, and thank you, and God bless America.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to take a short break while we change out candidates for the next round.
Lance throws deep downfield. Mawachi behind the defense has the catch, and he is gone.
Great showing in the 100 butterfly. But you can't quite catch the leader.
And it's hard to throw you for a loop.
No, not when it comes to swimming. No, it's not.
So our third contest for tonight is Minnesota House District 37A, which covers parts of Coon Rapids, Blaine, and Spring Lake Park. The candidates for this race are Aaron Cagle here on the left and Anthony Wilder. We'll start off here with 3 questions that are provided to the candidates in advance. So we're going to start with Aaron, and then we'll go to Anthony, and then Anthony will start the next one. So describe your background and community involvement, Aaron.
Oh, background and community involvement. So I have been involved in this community in Blaine, Coon Rapids, Spring Lake Park since 2011 when I first moved to Spring Lake Park. But I think it goes back much deeper than that as far as being involved in community as a Minnesotan. It's something that has just kind of been embedded in our everyday life as a family. And so, you know, we always were taught to care about our neighbors, care about other people in our community, and really, what better way to do that than through public policy. I went to the University of Minnesota Duluth as a psychology major, and then ended up in the Master's in Advocacy and Political Leadership program, where I met ton of awesome people and really learned a lot about how to be an effective advocate in our community.
Thank you. Anthony?
Well, Gretchen, League of Women Voters, everyone here in attendance, thank you so much for being here. This is a really straightforward question. It deals with our direct qualifications, what we're doing. So I find myself extremely active in our community. I mean, I do teach, I do coach, I teach for the DNR with their youth firearm safety classes. But when we're looking at direct qualifications, for the last 3 years, I've already been serving with the Board of Managers for the Coon Creek Watershed. And for 2 of them, I've been the current president. And that's truly afforded me the opportunity to work with our commissioners, the ones who appoint us, the mayors, city councils, as well as agencies that are very prudent to the position that I'm asking for. Working with the Army Corps of Engineers, the Bowser, the DNR, and as well as others. So I think it's just really important to put qualified individuals. You know, even though I'm extremely excited about being on the board, I just know that this is my next step, and I'll be a great leader for us at the state level.
Thank you. Question 2, starting with Anthony. What are your qualifications for serving as a Minnesota representative, and why are you seeking this office?
Again, you know, why I feel like I am qualified individual for this position is because I've already been serving. You know, it's given me the opportunity to see truly all the projects cycling into our community, those who are putting forth the efforts to build our communities, and to why. There isn't a development, there's not a new business, there's not a street project that doesn't come across my desk, and just that information, that experience is going to project me within this position. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I think one of the biggest qualifications for me is that I'm just really passionate about helping people. I think that's been something that has been kind of reflected throughout my entire career. I've been an advocate for issue advocate. I've also lobbied on behalf of workers, families, people who were facing foreclosure during the 2008 foreclosure crisis. And then most recently I've shifted to nonprofit work where I really get to see the direct impact of the services we provide. Currently I'm the volunteer coordinator at the Eastside Learning Center, which is a program that supports kids pre-K through 3rd grade in individualized one-on-one tutoring. And I see that as just such a common sense program where if we can get our kids reading up to grade level by 3rd grade, it would save the state so much money when it comes to special education services. And so just through my work and my passions, I believe that makes me qualified to be the state legislature.
Thank you. The final of these 3 first questions. What issue are you most passionate about, and what are your plans to address this issue? Erin?
Well, it's hard to narrow that down because I think so many of these issues kind of interplay with each other. And so one of the issues that brought me to run for the legislature the first time around was healthcare. You know, I had my first back surgery at age 13. I was denied healthcare prior to the Affordable Care Act, and when I'm out on the doors talking with people, people are very frustrated because they are paying more and more and getting less and less. We have a system based on profit that, you know, the more that the insurance companies deny people care, the more profit they make. And I find that just absolutely morally wrong. But a lot of those other, you know, people are worried about how much they're paying for health care, how much they're taking home in their paychecks, which seems to be less and less, how much time they're spending in their car trying to get to and from work, and which takes away from time with their families. So really a lot of these issues are really focused around working people. And so I see a lot of these issues that surround working people as kind of my passion.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, we're talking about passion and what we feel like we can bring to the table in this position. So my passion, it would be really easy to go right to environment, right? That's where I've been spending my last 3 years. But at the same time, you know, my vocation was education. I did want to be a secondary ed English teacher. I mean, that is what I wanted. No Child Left Behind, Common Core really scared me as an educator, but I still get my fix as a DNR instructor. You know, so when I find my passion is, why did I start this? Why am I here present in front of you today? Why am I asking to be a leader? And it's truly from our aging and our elderly community. I mean, my grandparents were directly affected but with elder abuse, And I'd be happy to share my story, but it'd take a lot longer than 1 minute that I'm allocated, right? But at the same time, why? What these next 10 years are going to be so impactful for our baby boomers? What's happening to you now? It's only going to be magnified if the issues aren't taken care of now. If you're not represented well, it's not going to bode well. It's only going to magnify it. So put the right leaders in.
Thank you very much. So we're going to start with Anthony now, and we're going to have a series of questions about healthcare and insurance kind of stuff. So you ready for that?
Lay it on me.
Will you seek to increase spending and aid for mental health programs?
Mental health, we've had candidates all night long screaming about mental health and truly the need for increased funding, more appropriation of funds. Folks, we have $23 billion of our budget every single year. It's biannual, so it's 46. But at the same time, increasing funding, increasing taxes, I don't know truly if it's the best point of view. We've increased $8 billion in our budget the last 6 years. I don't know if it's prudent to ask you for more money or to try to find and allocate through the 105 bank accounts or funds that we have to try to find the ways to fund the mental health aspect that we truly need to pay attention to. We've had too many examples of those that are impacted in such family members, brothers, sisters, that just truly need to have our help, our aid, our attention. And I know as your legislator that I'll listen and I'll put those great words from you to great use at the Capitol. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, I do think we should allot more money to mental health programs. From my perspective, I see it as saving the state money. When we really nip these problems in the bud at the very beginning, then we're going to make sure that that we're keeping kids out of jail. That people are less likely to be involved in the criminal justice system. They're more likely to go on and get their high school and college education, vocational educations. And really, so I would like to work a lot with programs like the youth intervention programs that will help get kids out of trouble from the beginning and get them the services they need when they need it. And I think that's vital. And if we can get kids and people the help they need on the front end, then we'll have so many fewer problems further down the road.
Thank you. So we're going to start with you again, Aaron. Do you support MNsure? And should the funding be taken out of the general fund instead of its current source? MNsure was a start for a system that I believe was flawed to begin with. When we're talking about a healthcare system based on profit, again, this is a system where people are making money by denying people care, and I think that's wrong. I think it was a good first step. We needed to do something. I know that I benefited from not being able to get denied healthcare. My brothers benefited from being able to stay on my parents' plan, but again, I think that was the first step, and so we really need to move beyond our profit-based system to a system that ensures that all people get the care they need when they need it. Thank you, Anthony.
Gretchen, would you mind asking the question one more time, please?
Do you support MNsure? And should the funding be taken out of the general fund instead of its current source?
Well, our current administration did promise to repeal and replace. They didn't provide that. So what we're currently going on is what MNsure has become. I mean, you have your current legislator right in front of you telling you from the beginning MNsure was flawed. It was. It was very cumbersome for those that were trying to access it online. It was not a very good program to start. Now, that said, those who are on it are benefiting. There's nothing wrong with our system. The healthcare is being provided. People are receiving healthcare. True long wait lines, within phones, unanswered questions, a lot of red tape, just a lot of suggestions. Been provided to me while I've been at your doors. It's just, hey, listen, can you pay attention to some of these issues? I don't like waiting. I don't like paying or providing so much of my time and allocated to trying to get some answers that I feel that should have been presented to me already. So I just feel that from what I've had the opportunity to acquire from you at the doors, and is that we can do better, and we must.
Thanks. Different topic now. Starting with Anthony, we currently require education, testing, insurance, and registration for automobiles. Are you in favor of instituting similar process with regard to firearms? Why or why not? We currently require education, testing, insurance, and registration of automobiles. Are you in favor of instituting a similar process with regard to firearms?
So instituting a registration of firearms.
Education, testing, insurance, and registration.
Okay. So I have a ton of firearm experience. My family owns a gun range. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. I gotta be honest with you, when we transfer firearms, it does have your background checks. We currently do them. I think that any system can be improved. I think information from retired military, I believe that certain information needs to be improved, and so that we have all the information in front of us. But I don't believe in strict regulation and true gun reform. I believe that we paid attention to the mental health issue, and I believe that there's a strong correlation to why the question was being asked. So,
thank you. Erin?
Well, I believe in universal background checks, even on private sales. I think that, you know, with rights comes responsibilities, and it's all of our responsibility to make sure that, you know, we're being respectful of firearms. And I also believe in red flag laws, which would allow family members or police officers to petition a court when they feel that there's somebody who is a danger to themselves or others, to take away those weapons that are in the house. And so I do believe that the red flag laws would be a really good step in the right direction.
Gretchen, may I comment on that red flag?
Sure.
May I take a moment? This is a really scary.
Okay.
This is a really scary.
Oh, okay. All right. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. I would love to talk to you about the red flag law, though.
Here's a different topic, and we'll start with Erin. Why should we have a Met Council? What are the benefits and the negatives?
Well, I think, you know, the reason that we have a Met Council is so that we can do regional planning. And so we need to make sure that we have a system that where we have integrated transportation throughout the metro area. It wouldn't make sense for, you know, Anoka to have a different transportation system than Coon Rapids, than Minneapolis, than Apple Valley. And so making sure that we can get around from place to place. Also sewer systems and things that we can collaborate on. The waste treatment is another thing that Met Council does, and one of the things that I learned in my first session, which when we were doing all the reviews, is the aquifers and how they track the aquifers. And so it's pretty interesting to see what the Met Council does, but I do believe that there's always room for reform. And so making sure that we have staggered terms with the Met Council, I would not be opposed to a directly elected Met Council as well.
Thank you.
One more time, would you repeat the question?
Should we have a Met Council? What are the benefits and the negatives?
So in 2016, I made a weakness a strength here in 2018. You know, I was really weak with my knowledge points on Met Council, and so it just barred me to want to learn as much as I possibly can. And it just behooved me that I found that the Met Council is unelected. They are appointed by our governor. There's 17 hefty, you know, checks that they're going their way. I mean, there's just a ton of control. When they went from the water and sewer, they went into transportation. They're now into housing. This entity has such control and power. Now, I'm not. Reform is great, but it has to be real reform. I believe that there's maybe a way to incorporate our county commissioners right now throughout our state, and maybe appointing them to a Met Council. Since they're already elected, maybe have them, I think that there's different ways to approach a Met Council. I think that we do need one. We do need that representation, but I believe our current Met Council and the current structure has grown too strong, and I think that it needs to be attention to.
Thank you. So this is a question that'll take some listening to, and we're going to start with Anthony. How would you support securing retiree pensions and health care at the state level? And I think you can answer that about public employee pensions, which would be one that is directly in the state purview, and then also maybe laws about private pensions.
All right. So I recently spoke at a senior home in Coon Rapids here, and many of the concerns were just that. In the next 15 years, their pensions are set to expire, and they are worried, rightfully so. There's more that I need to learn. I think that being humble is important. What impacts that we need to make in this regard need to be made, needs to be paid attention to. But on my end, I do need to do a lot more research, and I will. So.
Thanks. Erin, would you like me to repeat it, or?
Well, no.
Okay.
So we did pass the state employees pension bill this past session to stabilize the pension funds. I know I have a couple of Ask Me folks here in the crowd who have benefited from that as well. But when I think about my husband and I's retirement compared to my dad's or my father-in-law's retirement, they both have pensions, and my husband and I are in defined contribution plans. And so I really find it terrifying that we are moving away from pension plans as a country and moving more to these defined benefits, because there's just so much more risk when it comes, or defined contributions, because there's just so much more risk when it comes to that. And so I think that we really need to make an effort to bring back pension plans, make sure that we're stable in our old age, and I think a lot of that then would help with some of the elderly housing crisis and things like that as well.
Thank you very much. So, starting with Erin, I've seen what happens with school cutbacks. What will you do to provide for the educational needs of our children?
Well, I think making sure our schools are fully funded is one of the top priorities that we absolutely have to do. And I think we need to be innovative in our schools, and that's where I see programs like America Reads, AmeriCorps, Math Corps, tutoring in the schools as a really great way to make sure that our students are thriving in our schools, and also that we're saving money in our schools. And so I think we need to make sure that our teachers are valued, that they're getting paid what they deserve to be paid, that our class sizes are not, huge. We need to make sure that we have small class sizes and that kids are getting the attention. And I'm also a big believer in community schools. I think that is just such an amazing resource to community schools. And so if we can get more community-based schools that support the families, that will also help folks, or it'll help the children as well.
Thank you. Anthony?
One more time, please.
I've seen what happens with school cutbacks. What would you do to provide for the educational needs of our children?
Right. It's been said many times, but it can't be said enough, that we deserve to provide the best education. I think even tonight, world-class education. We have everything to provide our students. We truly do at our fingertips. We can do better. We talked about innovation, right? And I'm happy that when I talked to the Spring Lake Park Council, man, the innovations, what's being previewed to these students is fantastic. It's phenomenal. I think they're in great hands in our public school systems, but we can't ignore that people are removing their students from public school systems. We have over 18,000 families that are choosing to homeschool. People charter schools are growing at rapid paces, and we talked about vouchers already, and people are truly telling me that they want that ability to choose, and so truly my entire point of walking and meeting you at your doors is to listen and to learn that. So thank you.
Well, the next question is about vouchers. Would you support school vouchers? Why or why not? And as we learned in the previous questions, this relates to money coming from the public schools to go to private schools.
Vouchers, right? Again, this is what I've been hearing. We have a growing, very dynamic community. Truly, 37A is fantastic. I'll say it this way, we have young families moving in. They're concerned about where their child's going to go to school. They have done their research, and that's why they moved into our area. We have a very wonderful school system. We have a very dynamic way that we're communicating with our students, and we need to improve. I believe that voucher systems are a way right now that people are speaking through us, and that they're saying that they want their choice to be heard. And right now, that's the way that I would vote until I hear otherwise.
Thank you, Erin.
I believe that public schools are, what we heard from our teachers this past session is that public schools are struggling right now. And so I don't believe taking money out of the public schools is the answer to help them make them succeed. And so absolutely, I think we have wonderful school choice here in Minnesota. We have charters, we have open enrollment, we have Montessori schools. There's tons of different options within the public school system. If people want to choose to go outside of the public school system, great, that's fine, but I don't think we should be taking money out of our public school system.
Thank you. Beginning with Aaron, do you believe gender identity should be a protected class in cases of discrimination in Minnesota?
Yes.
Yes?
Okay, well, that was a quickie. Starting with Anthony, do you think Minnesota should be a sanctuary state?
This is a very sensitive subject, immigration, everything right here. But what I'm choosing to say is that I don't believe that Minnesota needs a label. If you truly look in our district, we should be proud of our neighbors, our diversity. I know I am. But I just don't feel that the state really needs that label. And, you know, for me, I'm very proud to a member of my community. I treat truly everyone with the most respect that I possibly can, because that's the way that I would want to be treated. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I don't think it's just a label. It's how we, you know, it's how we welcome our neighbors and people who are fleeing desperate situations. And so, you know, it's a specific placement program where people can come and be safe out of from communities that have been war torn, where there's been civil unrest, where they've been politically persecuted. And I see immigration and diversity as something that makes us great. You know, it's just having neighbors who are, you know, from different countries and learning about their culture, I think is a wonderful thing. And I believe that we should be a sanctuary state.
Thank you. The final question before we go to closing statements. Since we have not yet taken sufficient actions to prevent at least moderate global warming, what would you propose to help our communities adapt to the coming climate change?
Well, I think, you know, making sure that we are prepared for disasters is kind of the bottom line. Unfortunately, we are getting to the point where we see more severe storms. You know, I mean, what is it, supposed to be 100 degrees this weekend in September? That's going to be fun door knocking weather. But, you know, making sure that we are prepared for storms and that everybody understands, you know, what to do in kind of in those situations. But I also think that we, you know, we can't give up. We need to make sure that we're fighting global climate change. And it's not only good for our environment, it's good for our workers and our state. And I think the more that we can invest in clean, green energy, the better we'll all be off.
Thank you. Anthony?
Gretchen, would you mind one more time, please?
Since we have not yet taken sufficient actions to prevent at least moderate global warming, what would you propose to help our communities adapt to the coming climate change?
To say that climate change isn't real or is it's not happening would be a farce. It would be a lie. We see, just as Aaron mentioned, a very highly concentrated cells and repetition. So when we have our science and our data that's coming to debate, we're seeing influx in these high pressured storms. You know, this impact that we're leaving is real. So, but to say that, you know, that we're falling short, we have so many wonderful agencies and people that make sure, and if I may, my watershed, the staff and the administration is fantastic. You are in such great hands, and you're lucky to have them. So just know that there are so many fantastic scientists and workers and the pollution agencies, and I mean, just know that there's so many great organizations that want to make sure that our natural resources are met and that they're satisfied and that they're there for generations to come. Thank you.
You know, I said it was going to be the last question, but I fibbed. So we'll start with Anthony.
Just kidding.
Since we have a couple more seconds. So what would you do to make the legislature more open and transparent to the public? And we'll
Right.
start with Anthony.
So our transparency is lacking. We have so many regulations and red tape, and we've truly convoluted the system on both ends. I mean, we talked about the omnibus bill. I mean, it shouldn't be, you know, 900 and some odd pages delivered. But to say 4 hours, I mean, come on, they had committee meetings, things were brought up on floor. To say that these topics were never brought up and issued and wouldn't be true either. But at the same time, it's not fair to drop everything into one bucket. It's not okay. So to be transparent as a legislator, we have every means possible through social media and email and just our phone calls. Reach out to us. I know that I'll listen every single time. I may not agree with you, but I will always answer my phone, always.
Thank you.
Well, in Minnesota, in our Constitution, we have a single subject rule, and so I believe that as a legislator, it is my job to keep leadership accountable to that single subject rule. And so, I would do everything within my power to make sure that the leadership, both in the House and in the governor's office, as much as I could in the Senate too, would hold true to that single subject rule. I also think that we need to make sure that the rules of the House are being followed. There's a lot of rulings on the floor, and I don't know if any of you guys are wonky and watch some of that stuff on TV, but when there's an objection to the rules, it kind of depends on who's sitting in the speaker's chair and how they're going to rule. And so we need to make sure that we're being held, those rules are being applied no matter who is sitting in the speaker's chair. And then I just want to make sure that, all of the pieces of legislation that do come before the legislature have been through the committee process, have been vetted, that the public has had time to look into it and put their word in as well.
Thank you very much. And so now we'll go to closing statements. And since Aaron started with opening, we'll let Anthony start with closing.
Wonderful. Well, Gretchen, thank you again for narrating, and thank you again for the League of Women Voters for putting on this event. And again, everyone, thank you for being here. This 3 years that I've been asking to lead in this role, these last 3 years, there hasn't been a street that I haven't been down. There hasn't been a door I haven't stood in front of. Now, conversations are really tough, but I've had them. You don't always agree with me. I don't always agree with you, but at the same time, you've been willing to talk with me. You've been able to share with your opinions with me. And as a legislator, I need to put my own personal beliefs aside so many times to understand the way that my decisions would affect many. And that's truly just where it comes from you. And I put in the time. I will continue to put in the time. November 6th, I ask for your vote. Please follow me on Twitter and Facebook and look at me up on my website. Give me a call. All my personal information is on there, and I just ask that you use it. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron?
Well, for the past 2 years at the legislature, I've been so honored to serve you, and I think one of the best parts of my job is listening to the constituents of 37A. Where am I? So getting out and talking to folks on the door and having people come into my office and let me know what their issues they're passionate about, and how the policies and the decisions that we make up at the Capitol affect their lives is one of the most humbling experiences I've ever had. My husband and I are looking to raise our family. We're expecting our first child here in December, and so we're so looking forward to raising our family in this community, and with all of you guys as part of that. And so I really hope to earn your vote come November 6th. So I thank you so much for being here and being part of this.
Well, thank you all. We're going to take a short break now while we swap out candidates and come back for round 4. Thank you.
The county hopes construction of the overpass can start in March or April and be finished by the start of the new school year.
Yes, I'm going to live to be 100.
The final contest for tonight is for Minnesota House District 36B, which covers parts of Coon Rapids and Brooklyn Park. The candidates for this race are Jermaine Bozzio, who did not show up tonight, and Melissa Hortman. We'll start off here with 3 questions that were provided to the candidates in advance. The first one, describe your background and community involvement, Melissa.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here tonight. I really appreciate the League of Women Voters calling these forums together to help educate the public on the local elections. I was born and raised in the North Metro area. I graduated from Blaine High School in 1988, and my children attended Champlin Park High School, so we're all Anoka Hennepin graduates. And As a high school student, it occurred to me that there was a real differential in funding for education, and I wanted to do something about it. And then when my kids started going to school in the North Metro area, I was even more committed to do something about that at the state level. So that's what led me to run for office. But before I ran for office, I worked on the Monroe Parent Legislative Team to try to improve school funding here in the Anoka-Hennepin District. We passed a levy in 2004 to better fund the schools. And from there, I started getting involved in legislative issues.
Thank you. The next one, what are your qualifications for serving as a Minnesota representative, and why are you seeking this office?
In addition to being a really active and involved parent in my children's school, I was a Girl Scout leader and a Sunday school teacher at St. Timothy's Catholic Church in Blaine. I worked at our family business, John's Auto Parts in Blaine. And you know, the thing about folks who grow up in Anoka County and North Metro families is we're really concerned about squeezing the value out of every nickel. And so what I learned at John's Auto Parts when in serving our customers was that they worked so hard for the money that they earned, and that we as a company had an obligation to not only take care of our employees like they were family, which we did, but also to provide a good value for our customers of our business and to stand behind the product that we sold. I was fortunate to be raised by parents who were really committed to community. My mom was the president of the parent-teacher organization when I was in elementary school, and my dad taught me to live by the golden rule and always treat people how you want to be treated. So I bring those values with me to public service.
Thank you. Third question, what issue are you most passionate about, and what are your plans to address this matter?
Public funding for education is the issue I'm the most passionate about. I think every child in the state of Minnesota deserves a world-class education. It shouldn't matter whether a kid grows up in Blaine or Edina. They should have the kind of schools that set them on a path for success in life. Whether that child ends up getting more training and has a great career in the trades, or whether that child chooses to go on and get a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree. In Minnesota, we had the Minnesota Miracle, and that equalized funding for a while because the state took on more of the funding, and that made it more fair. But over the years, we've chipped away at the Minnesota Miracle, and now we have too much of our education funding that's dependent on property taxes, and so we have unequal education. And I'm very passionate about addressing that. And since I've been in the legislature, we have increased equity funding and increased equalization to give a better shot to kids who come from poor zip codes, whether that's North Metro or Greater Minnesota.
Thanks. We're going to move to audience questions now, and some questions are also submitted online.
Okay.
Our excessively high health care costs have a negative effect on business and wages. Given this situation, what do you think the Minnesota legislature should do about our health care problems?
Well, we had a fantastic proposal this year to allow Minnesota families to buy into the Minnesota Care Plan. That would allow families to benefit from the cost savings of a large risk pool that spreads costs among more people. The Republicans shut that down and didn't give us a chance to even vote on it. But I think that moving forward, hopefully we'll have a new governor, hopefully we'll have a Democratic legislature, and we'll get a chance to move forward on letting families buy into Minnesota Care.
Thank you. Another healthcare related question. During the 2018 legislative session, over 70 legislators signed a bipartisan initiative calling upon the legislative auditor to apply only the most rigorous auditing on HMO handling of tax funds for public health programs. The legislative auditor has failed to answer this request. What should be done in 2019 about this situation of lax auditing of HMO's use of tax funds?
Well, you know, when Mark Dayton became governor, he put the HMO contracts out to bid. Under Governor Tim Pawlenty for 8 years, we had these no-bid contracts. And when Governor Dayton put the contracts out for bid, the cost dropped immediately. And so I think that having a transparent process when we're spending public dollars is extremely important. I think we need to continue along that line. The legislative auditor is an independent entity, and even though it has the name legislative in it, we don't get to direct exactly what the legislative auditor does. But at the state legislature, it is our job to provide oversight. That is why we have legislative committees. So whether the legislative auditor will look at that in detail or not, the chairs of the relevant committees can bring the HMOs into the committees and ask those questions.
Thanks. People with mental illness and substance abuse disorder need safe, affordable, and stable housing in order to recover. Unfortunately, they're much more likely to experience housing instability or even homelessness. What are you going to do to address this housing gap in our mental health system?
Well, you know, Hennepin County had a very innovative pilot program, and what they had determined is that folks who had substance abuse problems were costing an inordinate amount in terms of healthcare dollars. And what they found was they would treat the substance abuse disorder, and they would release the individual from the healthcare facility, and without stable housing, the individual would fall back into the healthcare crisis that brought them into the healthcare facility in the first place. So Hennepin County did a pilot project of providing housing to folks with substance abuse disorders, and they found that they actually saved the county money by providing housing for these folks. And so I think what we need to do is take the success that's happened in Hennepin County and expand that to other areas.
Thanks. Can you explain why you would or would not support restoring the right to vote to citizens living in the community on probation or parole due to a felony conviction?
Well, I think we need to have a really bright line test. There's no question about it. When an individual breaks the law, they have a debt to repay to society. And right now we have a system where when an individual has served their sentence and they're released back into the community, they're not entirely sure the moment at which their civil rights are restored and they can vote. Many other states have a bright line test. If you're incarcerated, if you're serving your sentence and you're in prison, not in jail for a temporary, waiting for a trial or something, but you're in prison, you can't vote. And when you get out, you can. And I think having a bright line test would make it clearer to everyone who's eligible to vote and who's not eligible to vote. Because the last thing in the world we want is somebody who's been released from prison, who's served their sentence, who wants to be active in civil society, goes to vote and then finds out that they weren't yet eligible to vote because they were still on some form of probation. It should be a bright line test that we can all understand.
We currently require education, testing, insurance, and registration of automobiles. Are you in favor of instituting a similar process with regard to firearms? Why or why not?
I don't think that that's necessary. I think there's some common sense gun violence prevention measures that the vast majority of law-abiding gun owners support. We had proposals in the legislature this year to implement a red flag system, which would mean if there's an individual who had articulated a desire to harm themselves or other people, that law enforcement would have a basis to then temporarily sequester the firearms. We didn't even get that to a floor vote in the Minnesota House of Representatives. The Republicans killed that in committee. Red flag laws would have prevented the Parkland shooting. Law enforcement was informed that this individual had a desire to harm others, but they did not have a legal basis to temporarily sequester the firearms. So I think there's reasonable gun violence prevention measures that fall far short of that type of a proposal.
Thank you. Why should we have a Met Council, and what are the benefits and the negatives?
We're very fortunate in this region that we had civic leaders come together in the 1970s to form the idea that brought us the Met Council. The reason why the Met Council makes sense is they deal with the water and sewer infrastructure and certain of the transit infrastructure for a multi-county area. It doesn't make sense to have transit stop at the borders of a county. So we shouldn't have buses stop at the border of Hennepin County or stop at the border of Ramsey County. They have to go in between counties. So we need an inter-county organization that efficiently handles things like water and sewer infrastructure and transit. Metropolitan Council is very efficient. Nationwide, they're recognized as one of the most cost-effective regional governance bodies. I do, though, think that it would be good to have elected representatives of the people serving on the Metropolitan Council because they do have taxing authority.
Thank you. Since we have not taken sufficient actions yet to prevent at least moderate global warming, what would you propose to help our communities adapt to coming climate change?
Well, part of what Metropolitan Council does actually is in that area. We need to change our wastewater system because we are currently not set up to handle the rain events that will be coming. But I think what we need to focus on is also efforts that we would undertake to mitigate climate change. It is not too late for us to change the trajectory of the temperature increase. There's no doubt that the temperature of the Earth will be increasing because of the amount of carbon dioxide we've already emitted. but we can control how large that temperature increase is, and we can still take meaningful actions. The thing that's very exciting in Minnesota is we have a significant wind resource, and we also have a very good solar resource. We're not a cloudy area, and our solar panels are efficient in the summer and the winter. So we can have a clean energy jobs bonanza in the state of Minnesota. In fact, we already have had that bonanza from the 2007 Renewable Energy Standard and the 2013 Solar Energy Standard. So we need to keep on this pathway of moving to clean energy and creating jobs while we do it.
Thank you. So we got a few questions now on how the House works and public process. How would you reform House rules to make the legislative process more open and transparent to the public?
Well, we need to use the process that exists. The problem we've had in recent years is we've had leaders who have aggregated all the power of the decision-making unto themselves, and they have not allowed the legislative committees to make public policy decisions in open committee. And we've not had conference committees with legislators on them making the final decisions at the end of the session. In recent years, we've had the top legislative leaders sitting in an office with the governor behind closed doors negotiating the final details of the budget bill. That is not how the process is set up to work. We actually don't need to change anything. We need to use the process that is there already. And we need leaders to allow all of the legislators and the public to participate in that process instead of aggregating that power unto themselves and making those decisions behind closed doors.
So then in a related question, how do you propose to get more cooperation and collaboration across the aisle?
Well, I really think if all of the legislators got to be engaged in policy making through their committee work, we would have better collaborative decisions. A great example this year is we had this 990-page garbage bill that the Republican speaker put on our desks on the last night of session with like 2 hours left, no time to read it. And there were a number of proposals in that bill that would have passed nearly unanimously or unanimously. And if the individuals in committees would have been able to pass those bills on to the floor, and they wouldn't have been stacked up by leadership and shoved into one gigantic bill, we could have passed several proposals. And what happens when you have a lot of small bills passing is you do have Republicans and Democrats working together to solve problems.
Thank you. Do you support a woman's right to make their own medical decision as it relates to reproductive health?
Yes.
With the Citizens United case dramatically changing how campaigns are funded, what do you think should be done?
We have to change the way campaigns are run in this country. And given the current state of First Amendment law, the only way to do that is to expand what Minnesota already has, which is a partially publicly financed campaign system. Candidates can agree to forego some of their First Amendment rights if they agree to spending limits and they agree to contribution limits. Right now, they get a small public subsidy. And right now, most candidates engage in this program and they forego some of their First Amendment rights in order to limit the amount of outside money that's coming in. What happens is, of course, we have massive spending by outside groups, which kind of subverts the program. So the program needs to be a lot bigger. Right now, in a race like mine in 2014, I spent about $50,000. Outside groups spent $500,000. If we had a public program that was larger, the candidate's voice would be larger in that whole big mess of outside spending.
Well, thank you. I think that we kind of wrapped up most of the topics that I've had, so we'll ask you to do your closing statement of 1 minute.
Well, thank you. I'm humbly asking the voters of District 36B for their vote to return to the Minnesota House of Representatives. Minnesotans deserve to have high-quality public education from preschool all the way through college and job training activities. I'm committed to working on that. Minnesotans also, each and every one of them, deserve to have affordable and accessible health care, and we can absolutely make progress on that. And finally, every single family deserves to have economic security. We need to have a minimum wage that's a livable wage. We need to have guaranteed, earned, paid, sick, and safe leave. So if people need to take care of a sick family member, they know that they'll have a job at the end of that. And we need to make sure that people have the right to collectively bargain for better wages for themselves and their families, because we know that union families make more money and they help us form stronger communities. So if I return to the Minnesota legislature, I will work to improve our public education funding, our healthcare opportunities, and economic security for Minnesota families.
Well, thank you very much. So I want to thank all the candidates for speaking to the voters about issues tonight and for running for office. Our democracy depends on citizen involvement. So thank you, audience members, too, for listening and coming up with great questions. So remember, the election's on November 6th. You can vote in person at your city offices beginning on September 21st or file for an absentee ballot and vote by mail. If you don't know where to vote, check the precinct finder on the Minnesota Secretary of State's website. And we'll see you at the polls. Thank you.